Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. I know you use this video to fall asleep. If you enjoy our stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what city are you watching? I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, let's dive in. The wind howled like a banshee through the skeletal trees that lined Highway 17. Not just a whisper, but a guttural scream that rattled the plate glass windows of the station, even made the fluorescent lights above flicker with an unnerving irregularity. I was alone, as always, the only speck of light for 50 miles in any direction, surrounded by an ocean of impenetrable darkness. The clock on the old coffee machine ticked past 3 a.m., each second a tiny metallic hammer blow against the silence. It was a normal Tuesday night, or at least as normal as it ever got out here at the Blackwood Ridge Gas and Go. But tonight, it wasn't normal. Not really. My hand still trembled, clutching the crumpled piece of yellowed receipt paper. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, each beat echoing the cold dread that had blossomed in my gut. It wasn't just the words scrawled across it, though they were bad enough. It was where I found it, tucked neatly, deliberately, under the loose floorboard beneath the counter. A floorboard only I knew was loose, a spot I sometimes hid my emergency candy stash. My manager, Old Man Jenkins, was a creature of habit. He left notes, sure, daily checklists, inventory updates, always on the counter, always in plain sight. He never hid anything, and he certainly never wrote things like this. "He sees you, Mark. Keep the light on." No signature, just those 5 words, chillingly familiar handwriting, etched into the cheap paper with a cheap ballpoint pen. My name, Mark. My name, which man Jenkins never used. It was always a kid or son, always, and the "he sees you." That wasn't a joke. Not in that looping, almost artistic script. It felt like a warning, a threat, a confession. I looked around the small, grimy convenience store, rows of dust-coated snacks, the hum of the fridge, the distant gurgle of the coffee maker. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. The shadows in the corners felt deeper, more expansive, like they were breathing. The silence between the wind's screams felt observant. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course. Just me, the flickering lights, and a message from a ghost, or worse, a living nightmare hiding in plain sight. This was where it all began. This was the night the quiet became something else entirely. The Blackwood Ridge, Gas and Go, wasn't just remote. It was isolated. Not a single house, not another business for an hour's drive in any direction. Just the 2-lane highway, swallowed whole by ancient, whispering pines and the perpetual choking fog that rolled in off the Blackwood River. I'd taken the job because it was a job. After dropping out of college, after the rent became a joke I couldn't afford to laugh at. After my car finally gave up the ghost and left me stranded in a town that had nothing to offer but broken promises and empty storefronts, I'd stumbled onto this listing. Overnight attendant, remote location, must be comfortable working alone. Comfort wasn't the word I'd use, but desperation was a powerful motivator. My shifts usually started at 9 p.m. and stretched until 7 a.m., 10 hours of silence, broken only by the occasional 18-wheeler rumbling past, its massive tires singing a low, mournful tune on the asphalt. Or, on rare nights, a lost traveler, eyes wide with exhaustion, asking for directions to a town that probably hadn't existed for 50 years. Mostly, though, it was just me. Me and the dust motes dancing in the sickly yellow glow of the overhead lights. Man Jenkins would clock out just as I was clocking in. A squat, balding man with a perpetually stained apron and a gruff demeanor that somehow managed to feel more comforting than threatening. He had a way of barking orders, but his eyes always held a tired kindness. He ran the place like a relic from another era. No computers for inventory, just a ledger. No security cameras, just a sturdy lock on the door and a shotgun he kept under the counter. For raccoons and the occasional meth head, he'd always say with a wink. "All right, kid," he'd grunt, handing me the keys and a crumpled stack of bills from the day's takings. "Coffee's fresh. Don't let the shadows bite." It was his standard closing line, a sort of darkly humorous benediction. I'd usually just nod, grab a cup of the stale, burnt coffee, and settle in for another long night of reading dog-eared paperbacks and listening to static on the ancient radio. The loose floorboard was my secret. A relic from some forgotten renovation, it sat just to the right of the register under the ancient wooden counter. If you pressed just right, a small corner would pop up, revealing a shallow, dusty cavity. I used it to stash a candy bar, maybe an extra pack of gum for those desperate moments when boredom felt like a physical ache. No one knew about it. Not Jenkins, not the few truckers who stopped by regularly, just me. So when I reached for my emergency Snickers, only to feel a foreign, crinkly texture, my first thought was that a rat had gotten in. A big, fat one. My fingers fumbled, expecting something slick and furred, but instead they closed around the dry, thin edge of paper. I pulled it out, my brow furrowed in confusion, and the fluorescent lights, in their usual erratic dance, seemed to dim just as I unfurled it. "He sees you, Mark. Keep the light on." My breath hitched. The blood in my veins felt like ice. For a full minute, maybe more, I just stood there, staring at the words, willing them to change, to morph into something mundane, like "check the stock," "mark," or "don't forget the trash." But they didn't. They just sat there, stark and terrifying. The handwriting. That was the first thing that really slammed into me, harder than any cold dread. It was Jenkins' handwriting. I knew it. The way the M looped, the sharp slant of the K, the almost childish curl of the S. I'd seen it 1,000 times on inventory sheets, on the "closed for emergencies" sign he occasionally taped to the door when he needed a day off. It was undeniably his. But the words, Mark. He never called me Mark, not once in the 6 months I'd worked there. It was always kid, always son. It was a tiny detail, but it screamed wrongness louder than any siren. And "he sees you." Who was he? A joke? A prank? Jenkins wasn't the prank type. He was a man of routine, of predictable grunts and predictable actions. This was a deviation so profound it felt like a rift in the fabric of the universe. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe he was having a laugh. Maybe he'd seen me stash candy, decided to mess with me. But the tone of the note, it wasn't playful. It was stark, urgent. The "keep the light on" wasn't a suggestion. It felt like a command, a warning against the encroaching darkness. I tried to shake it off. "It's nothing, Mark," I mumbled, my voice a dry rasp in the cavernous silence of the store. Just Jenkins being weird. But even as I said it, the words felt hollow, a flimsy shield against the growing terror. The wind outside seemed to pick up, not just howling but rattling the whole building, making the old timbers groan like something in pain. I stuffed the note back into my apron pocket, needing it out of sight, yet also needing it close, like a morbid talisman. My gaze drifted to the row of windows that faced the highway. Black. Utterly, completely black. The weak beams of the gas station's canopy lights barely cut through the oppressive void. Beyond that, the endless, suffocating maw of the blackwood forest. Trees so dense, so ancient, they seemed to absorb all light, all sound. Suddenly, the silence inside the station felt heavier. Every creak of the old building, every gurgle from the coffee machine, every faint hum of the fluorescent ballasts seemed amplified, distorted. My eyes darted from shadow to shadow. Had the soda fridge always vibrated with such a low, guttural growl? Did the shelf of motor oil always cast such long, claw-like shadows across the floor? I found myself holding my breath, straining to hear something beyond the wind. A footstep, a whisper, anything that would explain this sudden, profound shift in the atmosphere. Nothing. Just the endless moan of the wind, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of my own frantic heart. The phone, my lifeline. I pulled it out again, thumbing the screen. Still no signal. 2 bars of useless static. Blackwood Ridge was a dead zone. The station had a landline, an ancient rotary phone behind the counter, but it was for emergencies only, and the line had been dead for weeks anyway. A minor detail Jenkins had yet to get around to fixing. I was truly alone. Miles from anywhere, with a message from my manager that implied I was being watched. By him. Whoever he was. And I was supposed to keep the light on. My gaze fell on the main switch, a large red lever near the back exit. It controlled the canopy lights, the main interior lights, everything. Jenkins was always meticulous about making sure they were blazing bright, even on the emptiest nights. "Visibility is key, kid," he'd always say. "Deters trouble." Now, that phrase took on a whole new, chilling meaning. Could this be a test? A bizarre initiation into the weirdness of working out here? But my gut screamed otherwise. My gut screamed fear. A primal, suffocating fear that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The air itself felt colder, as if some invisible presence had just walked through the room, dragging with it the chill of the grave. I walked slowly towards the front windows, peering out into the inky blackness. The highway stretched like a ribbon of forgotten dreams, disappearing into the mist-shrouded distance. Nothing. Just trees, and the occasional sparkle of dew on the long, untrimmed grass that bordered the property. But then, my eyes caught something. A flicker, in the absolute, crushing dark of the forest, beyond the reach of the canopy lights, just at the very edge of my peripheral vision. It was gone almost as soon as I registered it. A tiny glint, like a pinprick of reflected light. Too quick, too faint. My breath hitched again, my heart hammered. "No," I whispered, pressing my face closer to the cold glass. It was nothing, just the wind playing tricks, but a part of me, a deep, ancient part of my brain, knew it wasn't the wind. It was too precise, too deliberate, that momentary flash. It felt like an eye, watching. My mind replayed the note. "He sees you, Mark." The world outside the glass, that vast, silent, terrifying expanse, suddenly felt less empty. It felt occupied. And whatever occupied it, whatever he was, it was out there, and it was looking in, at me. I backed away from the window, my steps unsteady. My gaze swept over the brightly lit shelves, the mundane items of a gas station convenience store. They were supposed to be comforting, familiar. But now, under the weight of that invisible gaze, they seemed to mock me. Every package of chips, every soda can, every car air freshener seemed to hum with an unheard tension. The clock on the coffee machine read 3:15 a.m. Just 15 minutes since I'd found the note. 15 minutes that had stretched into an eternity. 15 minutes that had transformed my lonely, boring night shift into something else entirely. Something terrifying. I needed to call Jenkins. He was the only one who could explain this. But his number wasn't in my phone. I'd never needed it. He was always there in the morning. Besides, even if I had it, no signal. I was trapped, alone, with a warning from my manager and the growing, sickening certainty that I was no longer alone in this desolate stretch of highway. "Keep the light on," the note had said. I didn't need to be told twice. Every single light in the station would stay blazing, my only shield against the impenetrable, watchful darkness, and whatever might be hiding within it. I felt a shiver, not of cold, but of profound dread, trace a path down my spine. The gas station, my dull, predictable refuge, had become a glass box, and something was peering in. The night had only just begun, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that by morning, if morning even came, nothing would ever be the same. The quiet had broken, and in its place a silence far more sinister had settled. The sound of something waiting, and I was the only one here to hear it, and see it, or rather to be seen by it. I grabbed the heavy metal broom from its hook beside the back door, its rough bristles providing little comfort, but its weight a small, insignificant anchor in the rising tide of my panic. It wasn't much, but it was something. I clutched it tight, my knuckles white, and forced myself to breathe. This was real. This was happening, and I had no idea why, or what he truly wanted. I stood there, the heavy metal broom a pitiful shield against an unseen enemy. My knuckles ached from gripping it, my whole body rigid with a tension that made my muscles burn. The initial shock had given way to a cold, analytical dread. I needed a plan. I needed to understand. My mind, usually a jumble of anxieties about overdue bills and my sputtering car, was now razor sharp, honed by pure, unadulterated fear. "Okay, Mark," I whispered, the sound swallowed by the vast silence. "Think. Jenkins. What would Jenkins do?" Jenkins was practical. Gruff, but practical. He wouldn't leave a note like that without a reason. A dark joke? Number? Not his style. A warning? Maybe. But a warning about what? Or who? "He sees you, Mark. Keep the light on." The words were burned into my retinas. He, not they, singular, specific, and the "sees you" wasn't a casual observation. It was a declaration, a statement of fact. My eyes swept over the store again, but this time I wasn't looking for shadows. I was looking for anything else out of place, anything Jenkins might have left. He was a creature of routine, yes, but also of minor eccentricities. He'd leave notes on the register for change counts, or on the coffee machine if it needed cleaning, but always in the open, never hidden. I began to move, slowly at first, then with more purpose. My footsteps seemed unnaturally loud on the linoleum. Every small sound made me flinch. The compressor on the soda fridge kicked on with a sudden, violent shudder, making me jump, the broom nearly clattering to the floor. "Damn it," I muttered, pressing a hand to my chest, trying to calm the furious thumping beneath my ribs. This wasn't helping. I needed to focus. I checked under the counter, feeling along the underside of the old wood. Nothing. Just dust, dried spills, and the lingering scent of stale coffee. I pulled out the register drawer, quickly scanning the compartments. No stray notes, no hidden messages, just the usual jumble of coins and bills. Next, I moved to the back office, a cramped, windowless closet barely big enough for a desk, a filing cabinet, and a perpetually flickering bare bulb. Jenkins' domain. He usually kept it locked, but tonight, perhaps in his haste to leave, or perhaps for another, more unsettling reason, the door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly, cautiously, half expecting something to spring out at me. The office was a mess, as usual. Stacks of invoices, empty coffee cups, and a calendar with various dates circled in red, probably reminding him to reorder wiper fluid or send in gas receipts. My gaze landed on his desk. A thick, leather-bound ledger sat open, his sprawling, familiar handwriting filling its pages with numbers and inventory counts. Beside it, a half-empty mug, a pen, and a small stack of sticky notes. I picked up the top sticky note. It read simply, "Call supplier, DEF order, mundane, normal." I flipped through the rest. "Check propane tank level, clean out ice machine filter." All typical Jenkins. Nothing about he, nothing about Mark. My hope, a tiny, desperate flicker, began to die. This was it. The only unusual thing was the note under the floorboard, which meant it was deliberately hidden and deliberately found by me. I slumped into Jenkins' creaky office chair, the old springs groaning under my weight. The air in the office felt stale, heavy. I closed my eyes, trying to force myself to think rationally. There had to be an explanation. Maybe someone else knew about the loose floorboard, a former employee. But I'd been here 6 months and Jenkins rarely spoke of anyone before me. This was my secret spot, unless Jenkins himself had seen me hide a candy bar once or twice and decided to use it. But for what? To scare me? Why? Jenkins was a cantankerous old man, but he wasn't malicious, and his "keep the light on" line always felt like a genuine piece of advice, not a veiled threat. I replayed my last interaction with him, just a few hours ago. He'd handed me the keys, grunted his usual parting words. Nothing seemed amiss. He'd looked tired, maybe, a little more worn than usual, but that was just Jenkins. The years of working alone, breathing in gasoline fumes and stale coffee, had etched themselves onto his face. He'd even offered me a half-eaten donut, which I'd politely declined. He was normal, and that made the note even more terrifying, because if he wrote it, if it was truly his handwriting, then something had happened to Jenkins. Or Jenkins knew something truly awful, and he was trying to tell me. My eyes darted to the heavy-duty lock on the back office door. If Jenkins knew about if he was warning me, why wouldn't he have been more explicit? Why not tell me directly? Unless he couldn't. Unless he was already present, already watching. A sudden, sharp rap on the front window made me leap from the chair with a strangled gasp. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands flew up, ready to defend. I spun around, my eyes wide with terror, expecting... What? A distorted face? A monstrous silhouette? Nothing. Just the wind. A tree branch whipping against the glass. The sound was loud, sharp, made worse by my heightened state. I stood there, trembling, sweat beading on my forehead despite the chill in the air. This was what fear did. It twisted ordinary things into instruments of terror. It turned the familiar into something alien and threatening. But even as I tried to rationalize, a cold, hard knot of dread refused to loosen. That flicker in the forest. It wasn't my imagination. I was sure of it. I walked back out to the main store floor, clutching the broom, my grip still tight. My gaze fell on the shotgun Jenkins kept under the counter. It was heavy, old. I'd seen him take it out once to clean it. He'd shown me how to use it, just in case. For raccoons, he'd grinned. Now, the thought of it offered a sliver of desperate comfort. My hands fumbled under the counter, feeling for the cold metal. It was there, nestled in its usual spot, wrapped in an old canvas cloth. I pulled it out, the weight surprisingly heavy, solid. It felt real, a tool, a weapon, not just a candy bar and a flimsy note. The double barrel gleamed dully in the fluorescent light. I remembered Jenkins telling me it was loaded. Always, he'd said, never know when a critter might get in. I checked the breech. 2 heavy-gauge shells gleamed back at me. Loaded, just as he said. This wasn't just a prank. This wasn't some weird joke. Jenkins didn't joke about loaded firearms, and he didn't joke about being watched. He didn't joke about anything that could put the station or me in danger. My paranoia, which I had tried so desperately to fight, now felt validated. Armed with the shotgun, I felt a slight, almost imperceptible shift in my posture. Less victim, more survivor. But the fear hadn't gone. It had just transformed, becoming a colder, sharper resolve. I needed to see outside, really see. Not just glimpses, not just flickers. I walked to the window again, this time with the shotgun held loosely, pointed towards the floor, but ready. I pressed my face close to the glass, cupping my hands around my eyes to cut out the reflection of the store lights. The darkness was absolute, but my eyes were adjusting. The silhouettes of the ancient pines, their branches gnarled and claw-like, scraped against the pale, bruised-looking sky. The wind still wailed, but now it sounded less like a banshee and more like a chorus of low, guttural whispers just at the edge of hearing. I strained my eyes, scanning the tree line, the ditch beside the highway, every shadow. Nothing, just the endless, suffocating blackness. And then, there it was again. Not a flicker this time, a distinct, unnerving movement. Deep in the trees, where the light couldn't reach, something shifted. A shadow within shadows, too large for a deer, too slow for a rabbit. It was deliberate, like something moving through underbrush, trying to be silent, but failing. My breath caught in my throat. My heart leapt into my mouth, nearly choking me. I pressed my face harder against the glass, trying to pierce the gloom, trying to make sense of the formless, shifting mass. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't the wind. Something was out there, and it was moving. Towards the station. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was it. This was he. I backed away from the window, my eyes still glued to the spot where I'd seen the movement. The air in the store, previously stale, now felt thick, heavy with an unseen presence. My skin crawled. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to lock myself in the back office, to call for help. But where? And who? The note. Keep the light on. Why? Was it a deterrent? Was it a beacon? Or was it something else entirely? What if the light was the only thing keeping he out? My mind flashed back to something Jenkins had said a few weeks ago over a lukewarm cup of coffee. He'd been unusually quiet that morning, his eyes distant. Used to be, he'd mused, stirring his coffee. Folks didn't like this stretch of road at night. Said things happened, unexplained things. Used to be more lights too. Towns, farms, now, just us. He trailed off, shaking his head, then snapped back to his usual gruff self. I'd dismissed it as old man ramblings, a local legend. Now it echoed in my ears with chilling clarity. Unexplained things. Was Jenkins's gruffness a facade? Was he trying to protect me or warn me in his own strange way? Was this note the culmination of years of strange happenings out here? Things he couldn't explain, couldn't fight? I walked the perimeter of the store, shotgun held ready, my eyes scanning the shelves, the ceiling, the floor. Every sound was magnified. The soft drip-drip from a leaky faucet in the bathroom, The almost imperceptible creak of the building settling, the distant hum of the refrigerators, they all sounded sinister now, malignant. I approached the back door, the one that led to the small gravel parking lot and the overflowing dumpster. It was a sturdy metal door, but the lock was old, a simple deadbolt, not secure enough against anything truly determined. I checked it anyway, pushing against it, making sure it was firmly engaged. It was. My attention was then drawn to the small, dusty window in the door. It was high up, just a small pane of reinforced glass. I had to stand on my tiptoes to peer out. More darkness. The sickly yellow glow of a single floodlight over the dumpster barely cut through the gloom. Beyond that, the endless, suffocating forest. Suddenly, a faint metallic scrape came from outside, right near the dumpster. My head whipped around. My eyes darted to the window, straining to see. Nothing. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was methodical, like something being dragged, or someone. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my chest. I lowered the shotgun, my hands sweating. Was it a raccoon? Trying to get into the dumpster? That was the logical explanation. But the sound didn't feel like a raccoon. It felt heavier, more deliberate. I edged closer to the door, pressing my ear against the cold metal. I held my breath, listening, straining against the rising cacophony of my own pulse. Nothing, just the wind. And then, fainter this time, a soft thump, like something heavy had been set down, or dropped. I swallowed, my throat dry. I wanted to see. I needed to see. But I was terrified. What if he was out there? What if he was waiting? The note flashed in my mind again. Keep the light on. I glanced at the light switch near the door, the big red lever. It controlled the exterior floodlights too. Maybe turning on more light would help. Deter it. Drive it away. Or maybe it would just make me a more obvious target. A cold bead of sweat traced a path down my temple. My hands tightened on the shotgun. I was paralyzed, caught between the desperate need to know and the primal urge to hide. The sounds had stopped. The silence that followed was even more oppressive, heavier, more watchful than before. Whatever had been out there, whatever had made those sounds, it was now silent, waiting, and I was standing here, in the middle of nowhere, with a shotgun, a dead phone, and a note from my manager warning me that he saw me. The night was growing darker, the quiet deepening, and I had a sickening feeling that the truly terrifying part was only just beginning. The faint thump from outside the back door solidified a terrible truth. This wasn't a raccoon. Raccoons didn't drag things. They didn't drop them with such finality. My mind, usually prone to rationalization, buckled under the weight of sheer terror. Whatever was out there, it was big enough to make a deliberate sound, quiet enough to be almost unheard, and sinister enough to make the hairs on my arms stand on end. I squeezed my eyes shut, then forced them open. Keep the light on. The note's command echoed in my mind. Was it a shield, or was it a spotlight drawing attention? I needed more light. I needed to see. The unknown was 1,000 times worse than any sight, no matter how horrifying. My hand, slick with sweat, reached for the red lever. With a decisive click, I slammed it down. The single floodlight over the dumpster, which had been a weak, sickly yellow, instantly intensified, bathing the immediate area in a harsh, almost clinical white. Beyond that, 2 more powerful beams mounted on the far corners of the building roared to life, cutting through the encroaching darkness of the tree line like surgical lasers. The sudden burst of illumination felt like a physical blow. The shadows, previously deep and breathing, receded slightly, though they still clung stubbornly to the deepest parts of the forest. The wind, still howling, seemed to diminish for a second, overwhelmed by the sudden, stark clarity. I pressed my face against the small pane of glass in the back door, cupping my hands again, desperate for any glimpse. The gravel parking lot was empty. The dumpster, a massive metal beast, stood as it always did, overflowing with the day's trash. Nothing looked disturbed. But then, my eyes, now accustomed to the intense light, caught something. Not near the dumpster, but further back, just at the very edge of the newly expanded light, where the asphalt met the overgrown weeds and the looming forest began. A boot print, clear, distinct, pressed into the damp earth. It was large, unusually large, and next to it a drag mark, a wide, shallow furrow in the dirt leading from the tree line towards the dumpster, then stopping abruptly, as if whatever had been dragged had been deposited or picked up. My stomach churned. This wasn't a raccoon. This wasn't an animal at all. This was a person with very large feet, and that drag mark, it suggested a weight, a body. The thought hit me like a physical blow. Jenkins, my manager, number. It couldn't be. He'd left hours ago. He'd been fine. He'd offered me a donut, but the note, his handwriting. "He sees you, Mark." Was he trying to warn me, even as he himself was taken? A frantic urgency seized me. I had to know. I had to see. Logic screamed at me to stay inside, to lock every door, to huddle in the office with the shotgun. But the boot print, the drag mark, the sickening implication of Jenkins, I couldn't ignore it. With trembling hands, I unlocked the deadbolt on the back door. The old mechanism groaned, a sound that seemed deafening in the suddenly quiet night. I pushed the door open just a crack, the cold, damp air rushing in, carrying with it the scent of pine, wet earth, and something else. Something faint, something metallic, blood. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. I swung the shotgun up, holding it with both hands, the heavy stock digging into my shoulder. I pushed the door open wider, stepping out onto the small concrete stoop, my eyes darting left, then right, scanning the perimeter. The powerful floodlights cut harsh shadows, turning every tree into a monstrous silhouette, every bush into a lurking predator. I held my breath, listening. The wind was a constant moan, but beneath it, nothing. No rustling, no footsteps, just the terrifying, watchful silence of the forest. I took a tentative step off the stoop, onto the gravel. Each crunch of my boot sounded like an explosion. My eyes were fixed on the boot print and the drag mark. I moved towards them, shotgun raised, every muscle in my body screaming for me to run back inside. The boot print was indeed massive, larger than any I'd ever seen. It was clearly a work boot with a deep, aggressive tread. And the drag mark, it ended right at the edge of the dumpster, as if something heavy had been hauled right up to it. Then I saw it, tucked into the grimy crack between the dumpster and the back wall of the station, almost perfectly hidden in the deep shadow cast by the dumpster's lid. Another note, yellowed receipt paper, folded meticulously into a small, tight square. My stomach lurched. My breath caught. This was it. Another message from he or from Jenkins in his final moments. My fingers, numb with cold and fear, fumbled with the paper. I almost dropped the shotgun. I forced myself to lower it carefully, propping it against the wall, then ripped open the folded square. The harsh floodlight illuminated the words, scrawled in that same familiar looping hand. The whispers are louder when the light fades. don't trust the quiet. No Mark this time. No, he sees you. Just a chilling, poetic warning. The whispers are louder when the light fades. What whispers? I hadn't heard any whispers, only the wind. Was this a metaphor, or was there something literal to it? And don't trust the quiet. That sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. The quiet had been my constant companion out here. Now it was a lie, a deception. My eyes darted to the dark, black maw of the forest. The wind picked up, a sudden violent gust, making the trees sway and groan. And for a split second, I thought I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound, buried beneath the wind's roar. A low, guttural murmur, like distant voices speaking in a language I couldn't comprehend. The whispers. My blood ran cold. My mind, previously analytical, dissolved into a swirling vortex of panic. This wasn't a person. Or, if it was something far, far worse. Something that could manipulate sound. Something that could make me doubt my own sanity. I snatched the note, stuffing it into my pocket with the first one. My hand closed around the shotgun, my grip tight enough to crush bone. I spun around, my back pressed against the cold metal of the door, scanning the perimeter again. The shadows felt alive, twisting, stretching, reaching. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the building, every distant sigh of the wind now held a malevolent edge. "Hello?" I yelled, my voice cracking, thin and reedy in the vast expanse of the night. "Is anyone there?" Only the wind answered, mocking me with its empty howl, and perhaps, faintly, the return of those low guttural murmurs just at the edge of hearing, like the earth itself was speaking in tongues. I stumbled back inside, fumbling with the deadbolt, slamming the door shut and twisting the lock with desperate urgency. The cold metal felt like a lifeline. I leaned against the door, my chest heaving, the shotgun a heavy, comforting weight in my hands. The light. The note said, "Keep the light on." The whispers were louder when the light fades. Had I heard them before the floodlights came on? Or was it only now, knowing they existed, that my mind conjured them from the wind? Or were they real? I walked back to the counter, my legs feeling like lead, my heart still a frantic drum. I pulled out both notes, laying them side by side on the counter under the harsh fluorescent glare. "He sees you, Mark. Keep the light on." The whispers are louder when the light fades. Don't trust the quiet. 2 notes, both in Jenkins' handwriting, one hidden, one conspicuously placed near evidence of a struggle. A boot print, a drag mark, the faint metallic tang in the air. Jenkins. He had to be involved. Or he was a victim. A warning. A new horrifying thought burrowed its way into my mind, chilling me to the bone. What if Jenkins wasn't just warning me? What if he was trying to tell me something about he? What if the drag marks, the boot prints, the sounds? What if they weren't the arrival of he, but the departure of Jenkins? My stomach rebelled. I staggered to the tiny, grimy bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. The reflection in the mirror showed a stranger. Wide, terrified eyes, a pale, drawn face. My own face, but twisted by fear into an unrecognizable mask. I returned to the counter, my mind racing. Jenkins wouldn't just leave, he wouldn't abandon the station. This was his life. He was a creature of habit. If he was gone, it meant something happened, something terrible. And he'd used his last moments, or perhaps he had used Jenkins' hand to send me these cryptic, terrifying messages. The clock on the coffee machine read 3:45 a.m. Just 45 minutes. 45 minutes that had ripped apart my reality and replaced it with a nightmare. 45 minutes that had escalated from a weird note to the potential disappearance of my manager and the undeniable presence of something unnatural in the woods. I clutched the shotgun, its cold metal a grounding sensation. The quiet inside the store, the very quiet the note had warned me against, seemed to press in on me from all sides. It wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken threats, full of watchful eyes, full of those faint, distant whispers that I now knew were real. I was alone, truly alone, and whatever he was, whatever had taken Jenkins, it was still out there, in the woods, watching, waiting, and now it had left me a message, a chilling, personal message. Don't trust the quiet. And I couldn't. I couldn't trust anything anymore. Not the darkness, not the silence, and certainly not the idea that I was safe inside these thin walls. The night was a long, terrifying canvas, and the brushstrokes of dread were just beginning to paint their horrifying picture. The world had shrunk to the confines of this fluorescent-lit box, besieged by an unseen enemy in the vast, suffocating darkness outside. My breath came in ragged gasps, each one a desperate plea for normalcy. The note lay before me, stark and terrifying, mocking the fragile peace I'd once known. He sees you, Mark. Keep the light on. And the second, even more sinister, the whispers are louder when the light fades. Don't trust the quiet. Don't trust the quiet. The words clawed at my mind. The quiet was all I had ever known out here. It was my only companion, and now it was a lie, a camouflage for something unspeakable. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the wind's mournful howl. Not a whisper, not a scrape. It was a rhythmic thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate, coming from the roof. My head snapped up. My eyes darted to the ceiling, to the stained acoustic tiles. The sound was directly overhead, heavy, like something large and incredibly strong was moving across the old tin roof. My heart seized in my chest, a sudden, sharp pain. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't a trick of the wind. This was too heavy, too precise. It was moving, and it was above me. The silence that followed each thump was even worse than the sound itself, a pregnant pause that stretched into an eternity, filled with the unspoken horror of what might come next. The air in the store grew colder, thick with an unbearable tension. I felt an undeniable, primal urge to scream, to lash out, to do anything to break the spell of this terrifying, watchful silence. I gripped the shotgun tighter, its cold metal digging into my palms, the only real thing in a world that had utterly, horrifically unraveled. My eyes scanned every inch of the ceiling, every seam in the walls, searching for any sign of ingress. The gas station, my refuge, had become my cage. And then the thumping stopped, just like that, abruptly. The sudden quiet was deafening, pressing in on my eardrums, filling every crevice of my mind. It was the quiet the note had warned me against. A predatory quiet. The quiet of something that had found its spot. That was listening. My gaze was drawn back to the front window. The reflection of my own terrified face stared back, a ghostly apparition in the sickly fluorescent light. Beyond it, the vast, impenetrable blackness of the forest seemed to lean in, closer than before, its depths now completely impenetrable, completely silent. But it wasn't empty. I knew it wasn't. I could feel its presence, a cold, heavy weight pressing against the glass, against the walls, against my very soul. It was out there, in the quiet, watching me. Waiting. And the note, Jenkins' note, what if he wasn't just warning me? What if he was telling me that he was still here, or that he was inside him? What if he wasn't just a watcher, but something that could take over. The thought made me gag, a bitter, metallic taste rising in my throat. I looked at the clock. 4:10 a.m., still hours until dawn. Hours of this suffocating dread, hours of being hunted, hours of being trapped. I didn't know if I could make it. The lights were on, but they felt flimsy, like tissue paper against the crushing weight of the darkness. This isn't just a story I'm telling you. This is happening. Right now. I'm still here, at the Blackwood Ridge Gas and Go. The lights are still on, but the power flickers with increasing frequency, and every time the whispers from the forest seem to grow a little louder. I hear things in the quiet now, things that definitely aren't the wind. I've tried everything. The landline is dead. My cell phone is useless. I've sent messages to Jenkins' personal number, even though I know he won't get them. I'm shouting into a void, hoping something, anything, will hear me. And that's why I'm telling you this. Why I'm recording this. Because I don't know what else to do. I don't know what he is. I don't know what Jenkins meant by don't trust the quiet. But I know this. If I don't make it until morning, if the lights finally go out, then someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand what happened here. If any of you out there have ever experienced something like this, anything even remotely similar, something unexplainable, something that leaves cryptic warnings in a familiar hand, please, I'm begging you, leave a comment below. What do you think he is? What should I do? Should I stay here with the lights on, as Jenkins warned? Or should I make a run for it into the darkness, risk the unknown? Is there any way to fight something you can't even see? I need your thoughts. I need your advice. I need to know I'm not completely alone in this, because the whispers are getting louder, and the quiet feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for me to make a mistake. And I don't know how much longer I can keep the light on.